Hello and welcome, developers. My name's Shay, and this is another episode of Shay Develops. In this episode, we are going to be continuing our Code from Scratch series. We've been learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, at least enough to understand what the languages do and maybe how to Google uh, to get these languages to do what we want them to do in the future. All right, so if you're following along on the last video, you noticed maybe this doesn't look exactly the same as what you ended up with in the end. And that's because I had some issues my where the form was submitting itself like it should, but it was pre-validating and then it was validating and then submitting itself, and that's not really that's definitely not what you want. The validation part great, but then it should stop. And I was missing uh, something in that to for that to happen. I was missing something in my JavaScript code for that to happen. So I went, did some research, figured it out, and made a few minor updates with the CSS. For instance, I got rid of that border or box shadow thing that was around there if it was bad or whatever. And within my JavaScript, though, there's fairly a bit more changes. So let's go over these. We grab our form, it's document.element by ID contact form. So if we come up here, we have ID contact form for our contact. And then we set the action to contact.html. It really doesn't matter at this point, your action, because we're not delivering our data to the server. Everything's happening on the client's computer, on the client side, so on the visitors. And if you're not really sure what server side and client side means, client side basically what I just said. All the languages that are running on the front end on the browser of your visitor's computer. So you have HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Those are your fundamental ones that are your server side, and then your backend is could be Java, could be PHP. Um, a basic website would be like PHP or even maybe Python with the CGI or something uh, that you could work on to connect to the backend, and that is what runs on the server after it's made that connection to the computer. So the client doesn't see any of this going on. It's not happening within their computer, right? It's happening on the server itself. Okay, so let's so form.action, then we can have our function validate contact, and this is something important where we're passing the event, and the event is the add event listener submit. So whenever this submit button right here gets pressed, fires an event that we can then have access to within our validate contact function that we're calling. So we can then do event.prevent default. Now that's the part that changes this from doing the validation and then still submitting itself to the server side language to be processed, which is not what you want to do. This stops that event.prevent default, stops it from doing that, and stops it from functioning. So once we validate it, we can then actually send it to our or send it to do the server side processing like it was supposed to anyway. But what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to finish this, and then we're just going to be doing the JavaScript. We won't be doing the actual connecting to a database. Not in this series. I'm gonna do another series on that, but this one's getting a bit long, and I just really wanted to focus on the front end and validation and that kind of stuff. Stuff that you can actually like build and look at and understand uh, in a bit more tangible level. So we have this event prevent default, like I said, stops the form from doing the funky stuff that it was doing on the end of the last video. And then we're getting our name value, and then we're just getting the element or the input or right there, and then the email value and the bar question. Also get the inputs for there. So email put equals document dot get element ID, and it's called email. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll do the same thing for our question. This is so we can just put that error class on it. There we go. I think that's good. All right, and then I trim all the white space off the left and right side. So if somebody was to come in here and put name in any space and then a bunch of stuff and then a bunch of stuff and a bunch of spaces, but once I submit this, and it'll actually get rid of all the spaces on the side. So if you're actually seeing all those spaces now, we could alert name so you can see it, right? Have some spaces, stuff, submit, and you see we got all these spaces here on this right side, on the alert right here, or left side, excuse me. We move this alert after it's been trimmed, and then do it again. Oh, it doesn't save the trim? Well, then instead, we'll do name.trim. We'll alert that. I might have to actually save it into itself. And then that should, let's do that instead. Now add our spaces, text. There we go. See how it trimmed after now that we're alerting, it's gotten rid of the spaces from the left, and it would have gotten rid of all the ones on the right too, but I didn't put any in there. But that's what trim does here. Let's see now. There. I'm trying to highlight over those spaces. Correct. That's trim. It's just getting rid of some space on some text. And then, so we need to fix these though. So we need to say email equals and question. And the reason I didn't do this before is because I thought that by doing name.trim, it would save the updated version of name and in trim, and it didn't. So, you know, good to know. That's why you practice for stuff, right? All right, so we've got our validate text. This only checks if it's null, and if it only checks if it's null or an empty, which I guess technically would be fine. We could get some regular regex, regular expressions, and check to see if we can validate an email as well. So what I want to do, I don't really like the way that this validate text is functioning, but we're gonna leave that at the moment. So let's do function validate email, where we're going to pass the email, and we're only going to pass the email, okay? And we're going to do the error handling up here within the validate contact. We're see right now I've got doing it right here in the validate text. So I'm going to move that out of there where we've got this var message and we're adding the error message. Things go wrong. See right here, all form values are required, and that's fine. I want to do it a little bit better because right now it's dependent on each one, and not what I like. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna check if email is null or email is an empty string. If you notice, I use double quotes here, quotes here. Each are perfectly acceptable. So if each of these we want to return false, bad, and that means whenever we run this function validate email, I could test to see if it passes or not based off of what I return, and then use that information up here to then pass the right error messages to the right inputs. So if email, whenever, okay, we're returning false. That's interesting. I might have to do something different if they just, put in some whatever text in there and says, hey, please include an at symbol. Try to bypass that or whatever. I don't want them to be able to do that. So if email is not null or it's not an empty string, then it's going to continue on. In that case, we want to check. We could do an else if. I'm just going to do another if. If email. Let's do JavaScript regular expression for any. And I'm just going to Google this because I am not very good at regular expressions. To be perfectly honest, I do not feel like I would be able to do a course on that at the moment. However, though, just grabbing some text off the internet. Yeah, so regular expression does exactly what this flowchart is talking about. Where it's a function validate email. We are sending the email through this regular expression, and it says, "Hey, did it work? Yes, no. If it didn't work, well, here that's bad. If it did work, we can continue on." So our regular expression, this right here. Grab it. There. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it in its own little variable here. Var drag email. I think I'm going to use double quotes on this. The reason I'm using double quotes rather than single quotes is because there are single quotes within right here that would mess up our string value. So without having to there's a way, I forget the exact word for it, but there's a way to not comment out, but to turn. I'm always drawing a kind of a brain fart here. All right, so if this double quote was a single quote instead, it would have issues. It would have issues with this single quote, and that would end the string. So then now we've got all this other stuff coming in behind it. It's kind of junk, but if we didn't want that to end the string there, and we wanted it to keep going, we could say, hey, just think of this as a continuation of the string, and we could use this / right here to bypass. It wouldn't bypass it; it would still count it as a character within the string, but it wouldn't count it as the end of the string. So instead of having to do that, we use double quotes on here and here, and then we see here we have that exactly right there, but we can, pretty sure we can use it on itself to make it, well, we'll see if this works. It may not work. So this is definitely a test. I'm going to get rid of it for now and just keep it the way it is. And we will use it to test this valid regular expression with this email. So how to use a regular expression within the email, and I have an error. Oh, it's down here. Okay. So he's got a regular expression and they use dot test. Okay. Should be easy enough. So our regular expression is what? Reg email? Reg email dot test. We pass email. It'd be like alert. This is not an email address. All right. And then also turn false. And if it doesn't, if it validates, we just turn true. Go back here to score, scratch ED, that best education. Huh. So we'll put my name for here. Working. Oh, we gotta actually pass the validate email, don't we? Okay, so validate email. Pass it the email. That's it. Put in my name. Well, we're definitely not allowing it to change color or anything to see if we're getting anything. I think anything's happening on console. Okay. But it's definitely not running this right here because it's empty. Okay. That's because it's okay, and we have validation our on our form. So right now, this is a little HTML hack to tell the form to don't validate, even if you have like required attributes within your HTML already. You can just say, ignore all that. I don't want you to validate for right now because, hey, maybe I want to do some testing, right? Which is exactly what I want to do. Reg email.test is not a function. Okay. So it didn't like the way I regular expression. Yeah, regular expressions are patterns used to match character combinations and strings. Is that right there? These patterns are used with the exact and test method. Regular. Oh, apparently my regular expression did not have these. Is that what that's saying? They're using let, and I'm using var. I forget what the difference is. Maybe I should. Oh, okay. So this is the simple mode to call it, and then this, if you want it to be more specific, you like, no, I want a new regular expression. and then that's it. So I'm gonna do the full mode. That should work now. Well, it doesn't error out, so but it also doesn't alert us. I do want to just alert from the get-go. Reg email test, and just to see what we would get. Okay, so it got false. Oh, aha. So that makes total sense. All right, so if any of these are true, it's going to return false. But if this was false, it won't come down here and return this. So we want to check for the opposite. So we use this not symbol, which is an exclamation point, this test where to see if the regular email is not false or not true. So if it's not true, false, that means it is true, and then run this. Okay. I know. I'm sorry if I hurt your brain. All right. It's got our name and then Dupla. We'll hit submit. So, hey, this is not an email address. Nice. So let's try and trick it a little more. Oh, it took that. Oh, you know what? That's enough for now. I'm not gonna like get super duper in depth and try and like make sure it says either .com or .net or any of that stuff. If you want to get into that, by all means, go down that regular expression rabbit hole. I should make a video on it. You know why not? But not right now. No, not right now. Okay. So that's good as far as now. And I could return different error values. Say, hey, if validate email returns a 1 or a 2, a 1 means there's nothing, a 2 means it didn't pass the regular expression test, and 3 means true. You could do something like that if you wanted to. But for now, I'm just going to be like, hey, it's either going to test either one of these, and it's going to return false or it's going to return true. And we'll pass along the error message template that we've got going on. Okay. So we got validate email, and then now we need to function validate a question. Pass questions. I want to make sure if question equals null or not even question equals empty string or question dot length. Can I do that? Can I get the length of a string? Here, let's JavaScript length of yeah, so we just have okay. I don't even need to do that. So question dot length is greater than let's say 5 characters, right? It gotta be bigger than 5 characters. It will return, or I'm sorry, less than false. If not, it'll just return true. There we go. So now we have our validate email, validate question, and validate text. Now I want to get rid of this input part here. And then yeah, we just get rid of that whole bit right there. Make that super simple. Okay. Super simple validation right there. It either returns true or false based off of an if statement. All right. Or two. Get rid of that. So I could do it where I test them all and then put an error, my error border around each and every one of them. I think I would like that if I was to mess up personally. So I think that's how I'm going to code it, where it knows whether or not it validated the text, the email, or the question correctly, and update it accordingly. So what we're going to do, we are going to paste what I grabbed. Message main. I'm going to do that where it pops up right at the top of here where it has it's not. Oh, message. Oh, message. But it's not defined on line 25. Oh, okay. Put dot. All right. So that would be name input and okay. So the first thing we want to do is test if validate text be true. And so we're going to use the and operator and validate email is true. The reason I'm going kind of slow is I am live coding this. I haven't done any preparation besides previous knowledge. That's kind of failing me a little bit sometimes. All right, so validate text name, validate email, and validate question. Yeah, so if the form gets filled out correctly, it's going to say, hey, congrats, you filled out the form correctly. And it's just going to return true. That it so far is put in email, put in some stuff. Congrats, you filled out the form correctly. Awesome. Good. At least that works. Okay. So the next part, that would kind of be like, or that wouldn't kind of be like that. This is what we would run if we were like, okay, now I want you to submit the form or whatever, because everything's good. Please continue with your form submission. White space right there. Actually, rid of the, then do else. Because if this runs and we return true, it shouldn't technically run the rest of this code, but this basically guarantees that doesn't happen by putting within if and then our else statement right here. Which, if you're not familiar with those, I did make a video on it. I talked about it in Java, but it's basically the same thing in JavaScript, and there's lots of other videos out there. An if else statement tests if a condition is true or false, and then does stuff based on if that condition is true or false. All right, so else means that something's wrong. So now we need to figure out which one didn't validate. So if validate question, no, not validate text. If it's not true, well, yeah. So if validate text is false, we want to run this command where we have a message. We'll say var error text equals a name field is required. So then we could come in here into our contact section, and underneath each of these inputs, we'll do div dot error, have error message here at the top. I'll just call this just div dot error name. We'll do div dot error email. Then div dot error question. Now I have someplace to put HTML with my JavaScript whenever this validates poorly. Now we've got the input, but we also need to, what do I need? I need to get this div right here. The class error name. Instead of class error name, I'm actually going to make this ID across the whole thing. That makes it a little easier to grab in JavaScript. Just a little easier. So we got name input. Or we already have the name. No, we need the error. Is that what I called it? Name error or error name? Error name. We need to get or your name equals document dot get element D, and the ID is error name. Now with that information, you can now do error name dot inner HTML, then pass it basically this. Oh, then I'm going to have to change it to single quotes because of the double quotes issue class. name field required. Okay, I think that should do it for validating the text. Oh, now I'd also need to do this as well. And immediately I would want to do this because I want to just say, hey, there's definitely an error within here. Okay. All form values are required. Div ID error message. Okay. Hmm. Curious now. Just doing. Oh, this is part of coding. Problem solving. Can't problem solve. Probably gonna struggle a bit. Even if you really enjoy coding, you gotta get into the problem solving and accepting rejection. There is a lot of rejection, and it's not just being rejected by your code. I'm sorry that actually that's funny to me. Uh, that is a lot of the rejection that I'm talking about. But there's also rejection as far as finding a job and finding clients and all that stuff. You really got to prove yourself in this industry and say, hey, I know what I'm talking about. And you're doing it right now. This is where you start. You start by learning and then building and showing off. Like, hey, this is what I can. And then advertising yourself. I'm pretty terrible at that. So if everything works out, that's working correctly. Then we don't have this else statement is firing off, but let's inspect this. Div error name. Yeah, we're not getting anything. Error name dot inner HTML error text. And we're also not getting the name input dot class list dot add error as well within our input. If we submit that, yeah, it's not happening. So if validate text is not true, I guess I should actually specify and give it the name. I was just, never mind. I assumed it knew how to validate itself. Okay, there we go. Now it's working as intended. Great. Now we're going to continue on with email and the question. We're actually going to test these all individually. Validate tags. Email. Passive email. Basically just copy all this and throw it in here. Just email field required. Name. Email input. Error email. Email input dot class list. Here, email. Error.email. Nice. Hey, email field is required, name field is required, all form values. I like that. Okay, now we have one last one, which we're just going to copy that, then paste it, and it's going to be about question. Question. I'm sure this part's super awesome to watch while I change the values of these little bits of JavaScript. Error. Should be. Oh, man. All right. I like it. Name, email, and a question. Nick, congrats, you filled out the form correctly. Yay. All right. So that's basically validating form. Now, we're not checking for passwords or creating a login system or anything like that, but that you really need uh, both sides. You need JavaScript and server side. And even doing a form like this, you kind of need both sides as well, unless you just wanted to now take this and just save it to a file, which you can definitely do. And I said I was going to do that in another video, but I might retract that statement and make that a video for another time where I grab my validation, I grab this validate form information that I or code that I've written here, and then we'll continue then on with another video. I just don't want this one to grow into part 11, 12, 13, because I just want to keep building and adding more whenever I could really divide this stuff out and use and then create another coding from scratch video after I've already went through this one and then created all those other little videos that help piece everything together. So that way, whenever you get to that section and coding from scratch, you can be, oh, okay, so I can go over here and now watch the Ajax video or the full form video where we're doing we're actually like sending data to the database or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I just got to start somewhere, and I just don't want to overload people. But that is form done. The next thing I want to do is, though, go over here to this FAQ and add an ability to open and close the sections text, hide them, slide them up, and slide them down. I think that would be to have that kind of functionality. So I'm going to add that, and that's basically going to be the end of the series as a whole. And then, like I said, I'm going to go and continue and develop on more series and what, based off if anybody wants to know more about coding from scratch, or if anybody wants to know more about coding in the framework that I use, Spring Boot. Yeah, we're just gonna continue to keep going. All right, so we want to take a break here though, and we're gonna come back and do the next bit of the coding. Like I said, we'll take a quick break, get some water, walk around for a minute, and that's all right. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Please like, comment, subscribe, share with all your friends, do all that good stuff. Trying to hit that 100K subscribers. So that's gonna be super cool to get a silver play button, right? Why not? All right, you guys are awesome though. Take care.